issue we're discussing here is about the approval process, for example, of adverts. We had some insights a short while ago from Andy Rice, who's one of the people who's discussing this with us. And we know that there's been a lot of outrage about racially undertoned messaging that's been going on out there, people finding it offensive, and there's been outrage here in South Africa, including myself. I was very upset on Monday when I came on air about this whole hair advert from health and beauty retailer Clicks, and there's been all kinds of reaction, even political parties like the EFF climbing on the bandwagon. I've got with me in the studio Tumi Rabanye, a marketer. I've got Tebogo, Ditshego, CEO of Ditshego Media. I've got the advertising guru Andy Rice, and last but not least Gail, Schimmel, the CEO of the regulator. Now, in this part of the discussion, I just want us to focus firstly on what lessons can be learned, and then we'll end off by talking about what can be done realistically by marketers and advertisers, get some practical tips and the way forward. So we're not here again in a few weeks' time. Now, in my intro, I'm going to start with you, Tumi, in the studio. In my intro at 10 o'clock, I mentioned other recent incidents. I mean, remember Unilever's Dove magazine, where a black woman was transforming into a white woman. There have been a number of others. I mean, remember H&M's child T-shirt, blank monkey, kind of a cute monkey, whatever that nonsense was all about. And we keep on coming back here. Yeah. Now, looking at what has happened this week in the country, the reaction and how the retailers, as we speak, are pulling off the shelves the product that's in the eye of the storm, the Tressemme hair product. What are the lessons you think marketers and advocates should draw from this?
First of all, I would say short-termism in our thinking needs to stop. Research is not the preserve of a quarterly exercise. It's no longer that, because we are not short of sources of data and research on a day-to-day basis. Speaking about, the power of social media, there's a date and a timestamp from which you can actually deduce qualitative insights. I think it's very important to hold ourselves to a standard and accountable.
And Andy Rice mentioned earlier that it's not a desktop exercise either.
Absolutely, absolutely. So even coming out of your desk and interacting with the world is as quick as thinking of a consumer journey, for example. What a consumer would typically do is check social media before going out and making the final purchase decision. Now, walk in the shoes of the consumer. It's really not that complicated. And come out of fragmented thinking, I think.
That we need more immersion. Would you agree with that, Andy?
Absolutely. I think Tumi's dead right there in terms of getting off the chair in the office and getting out into the big wide world. I think there's also some procedural issues that could be sorted out more or less straight away. I am quite concerned about a global trend towards abandoning the independent advertising agency and taking work in-house with a design studio and people to produce, particularly, I think, digital executions. Or
budgets, Andy. Budgets, Andy. Maybe people's pockets are tight.
Well, absolutely. But I mean, look, if you gave, I'm not saying this was the case with the Clicks ad, but if you gave them the option of saving money with all the storm that follows, or spending a bit more and getting something that was sensitive and culturally appropriate, I know now where their money would go. So it's a short-term biased view to say I'm going to save some money this way. And in-house agencies are a real threat because you end up not being able to see the wood for the trees. You're just too close to the issue, and suddenly these controls fall away. There's a poor delegation of authority, and the result is this kind of extraordinary consumer response.
Yeah, because then it becomes just like a job. Tebogo, would you agree with that independence in the process, somebody stepping back, somebody from the outside can assist products to make sure that their messaging is appropriate on all fronts?
Yeah, I think Tumi and Andy are spot on in their analysis. I think beyond that, we also need to think about the importance of diversity within an organization, and organizations need to understand that diversity is in their best interest, and not just the diversity in terms of the numbers, but also in terms of decision-making powers. The voices of the people who you have hired should be heard, and you need to look at ensuring that your organization is reflective of society. Otherwise, you're going to keep having these issues time and again. And look at the consequences for Tressemme, which is now off of the shelves. So they need to take this very seriously.
Yeah, and Clicks has taken a battering as a retailer that sells all kinds of other products, but the product makers and the people who are marketing that product are the ones who are really should be taking the blame for this. Gail, you said you've received a lot of complaints about this. Have there been complaints about the ad, as in the Tressemme ad, to say Tressemme, do something about Tressemme, or Unilever, or it's been about Clicks?
All of the ads refer to Clicks, and I think it's because that we see a pattern where people don't actually react to the ad; they react to the Twitter outrage, and so they, in most cases, haven't actually seen the ad. Years and years ago, there was an excellent example at the previous body, the ASA, where we received 2,000 complaints from angry Christians who had seen an ad showing the Last Supper. And it was allegedly a Nando's ad, and it said, Jesus gets his chips. And we got 2,000 complaints about it. The ad did not exist. It wasn't a fake ad. It wasn't a real ad. It did not exist. Nobody could produce it. Nobody had actually seen it. Someone had just produced an uproar about it without anyone seeing it. And I think the same didn't happen here. This is a real ad, and this is a very real issue. But the complaints we got were in reaction to the social media outrage rather than in reaction to the actual ad.
Yeah. Now, Andy, there are other sensitive issues, emotive issues globally. Hair. I mean, we heard from Gail earlier. I mean, especially black women's hair in this country and internationally elsewhere is such a very, very politicized matter, and rightly so. Some people would argue. Is there, you mentioned culture earlier, and is there an understanding in boardrooms, in advertising world, which according to Tumi earlier is not transforming as fast as it should have in our country? Is there an understanding and appreciation of these nuances?
I think that generally speaking, senior management are fairly removed from the subtleties of brand marketing. And I think there's an interesting lesson that may be learnt from this and some of the other case studies you've mentioned over the last couple of years. And that is that brands can and should have the power to look beyond the short term and look at the long term, like Tumi was saying. Brands bounce back. That's the reality of it. And it's perhaps quite ironic that amongst the people who've been, or amongst the brands that have been mentioned in terms of discontinuing Tressemme is Ditshego. And Ditshego, as a direct competitor to Clicks, only a few months ago, was in big PR trouble for their pricing policies on face masks. So that's long not been forgotten, but it's long been superseded by other issues, and this one will too. And that is not to say, therefore, we can ignore it. If you want to build a strong brand, you have to do it in a way that shows that you are sensitive to the market audiences you're trying to reach, and particularly to their emotional needs, not to their shampoo buying habits, but to their desires within their social circle to be seen in a certain way. And often the big issue on which you can build a strong brand is not directly connected to consumption of that particular category. It's more likely to be connected to people's self-esteem, to their need for ambitions to be fulfilled, whatever it may be. Those are where the real nuggets of brand communication lie. But it's hard work to get there. And it's far easier if you can spot a shortcut to take that route and then worry about the consequences afterwards.
I guess there'll be lots of lessons here and how people can recover from this. Can Clicks recover, you think? I mean, Clicks is a brand. It's a well-loved healthcare retailer in South Africa. They've got a wonderful point system. I know family members and friends who go and swipe the Clicks card. When you go and fill up at an engine garage, they ask you for your Clicks card and all these things. So people have got benefit as well from it. Can it recover from this from a brand perspective?
I don't even think it's an option not to. I think the discussion needs to be around how what the road to recovery is.
But we interviewed, I'm trying to remember his name now, Vikesh, I can't remember his surname, the CEO,
right.
On Monday morning, and they came out to say, listen, I take accountability, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, we've suspended the employees who were involved, and we're going to take action in our processes and all of that. You don't think that's good enough?
I think the teachable moment here is around corporate citizenry, right? You, as a corporate citizen within a certain environment, within a certain territory, a country, culture, what have you come to comprehend about the target market, the market that you serve? And if anything, the means of recovery needs to revolve around that comprehension and the appreciation. The other thing that I observed very keenly was, once again, the absence of representation, diverse representation in the upper echelons of the organization. Now, when you're sitting there, I looked at the gap, the generational gap even.
Which you talk about clicks?
I'm talking about clicks,
okay.
And certainly you can see it as well reflected across Unilever perhaps, and you can see it in the Tressemme world as well. There's a binary sort of relationship that exists with, one, the information that is out there, with diversity, and with opinion. So in order for one to land, the other one must become obsolete. But that negates diversity. Diversity is about understanding, appreciating, and drawing from difference. Now, one opinion prevails, absolutely, we can see the results thereof. So the road to recovery for me is around understanding the role of diversity.
Is there a failure here of young people like yourselves, who are marketers, who are in advertising agencies, who've played roles in the front there, to speak up sometimes? Maybe think, okay, Andy knows more, he's been around for a long time, he's a guru there, I'm sitting around the same table with him, I'm going to keep quiet. Even if you see that, hey, fire is brewing, fire is going to be here.
I often speak about one having a vertical relationship with authority, where seniority, in terms of age, in terms of rank, somehow entitles one to hear less. And also in our communications arena, certainly, where opinion and diverse conversation matters, it's important, I think, to overcome that vertical relationship with authority, because conversation by its nature requires one to just come down.
Yeah, Tebogo, do you speak up? You tell your clients if you think here's a campaign, a communications campaign they want to go with, and then you can pick up that, hey, this might land them in trouble. You don't sit back and say, and I'm young, what do I know? Braden knows more than me because he's older.
Look, Dan, I'm actually lucky to still have some contracts because I'm very outspoken with my clients, and I warn them before a crisis hits that the direction in which you are taking is landing you towards a crisis. But we need to be honest in terms of how the corporate structure works. When you are a junior and you just arrive at an organization, you might see that this is wrong, but you are scared to voice it out because of the consequences of voicing your opinion. And I remember, I will not mention the institution, but I was elected into a certain institution where I raised issues around transformation, and their response was extremely violent. And this is something that we'll chat about in future, but it can be dangerous, and that's why it's important for us in terms of the structure for us to help these corporates to understand, as Tumi said, their corporate responsibility, their responsibility in terms of nation building, and they must stop this idea of having a structure that is based on a hierarchy where you do not listen to diverse opinions. You have to bring people who are diverse into your organization, and it's one thing to say something, but it's another to be heard.
Somebody said, when I sit around the table, I'll feel included when I'm being heard, when I'm being listened to. And Andy, you spoke about the procedural processes that must be looked at. It seems to me that there might be some kind of resistance sometimes. Maybe in this Tressemme case, somebody, a young person or with clicks or who look after the website might have said, hey, guys, are you sure about this? Hey, just put it up. Let's move on. Tressemme is a good product for us.
Well, if that's what happened, I'm not saying for one moment it is, it's a condemnation of the extent to which the true values of the brand and the organization have been understood and acted upon by everybody in the organization. Now, diversity is a word that we use a lot, and sometimes we're not quite sure exactly what we're referring to. And the simplest interpretation of diversity is about your own labor force, your own human capital, your own staff profile, as to say, the more they can reflect the people we're talking to, the better. And of course that is the case, but then, what do you do about gender products, or about, you've got to have 4 legs to be able to understand dog food. I mean, I'm being facetious, obviously. But the critical thing is that diversity needs to be pursued across a total societal platform and across the landscape of the country, and not just the landscape of the category that people are trying to market to. Because when you understand that, you'll have a much better likelihood of producing work that resonates and achieves the brand ambitions. It's quite ironic in a way that Unilever have built their strength globally on what they call sustainable living brands, which are brands with purpose. And perhaps that's why when the bigger they are, the harder they fall, and that's certainly been the case with Unilever and Tressemme.
Yeah, Gail, I'll bring you in here before we go to break, as we're going to be concluding shortly after the next short break. I know you are a regulator, you're coming in from the regulated side and stuff like that, but if we are to make a difference, if there's going to be a different way of coming across and messaging here, surely all voices are important around the table. You said yourself you get complaints from black people, from white people, about all kinds of ads coming from all angles. You can't hear me. I think, Gail, you can't hear. It's a pity she can't hear. We need to sort that Gail out, Gail audio issue. That's Gail Schimmel. She's a CEO of the Advertising Regulatory Board, having some audio issues there. We'll try and sort that out. But no audio issues with Tumi Rabanye. She's in the studio with me, with Andy Rice, the advertising guru, and the young man there, the dynamo, the Tebogo, Ditshego, will be talking to them when we come back as we end our conversation here on Today.